This is episode 3 of touring the old Chicago Jewish West Side area. For this episode, we concentrate on the streets to the south of Douglas Boulevard, between 15th and 18th. Looking at this map, we will work from west to east. As is indicated at the lower left-hand corner, we start at 18th and Ridgeway, which is where Anshe Matala was situated. We then move north to 16th and Hamlin to Congregation Anshe Mosier. We then go due east to 16th and Lawndale to Anshe Odessa. Then further north to 15th and Millard to Biker Cholim Anshe Russia, Poland. Then to 15th and Drake, where on the south side of the street was Congregation Anshe Leibovitz, and on the north side was Beth Jacob Anshe Crows. We stay on Drake and go halfway south on the block to Beth Abram Anshe Polem and finish this journey by heading a couple blocks east and then turning right and going a block further south to the middle of the 1600 block of Trumbull. So here we are on 18th Street at the southwest corner. This building here used to house Congregation Anshe Matala. My mother lived a half a block north on the 1600 south block of Ridgeway, but her family did not attend this synagogue. Instead, they went to one that was 6 blocks east that was comprised of members from the same European village from which my grandfather hailed. Notice the Jewish star at the top and the Hebrew or Yiddish letters right above the door. It reads Congregation Anshe Matala. Matel was a village in Russia. Pronouncing it as Matale adds a certain amount of endearment. The synagogue was also known as the Carpenter's Shul, as many of the immigrants who came from Matel were experienced carpenters. In the 1950s, when the neighborhood changed, it was forced to relocate, and it picked the West Rogers Park neighborhood in Chicago and still thrives there on California Avenue. By the way, the first president of Israel, Chaim Weizmann, hailed from Matel, and when he visited Chicago, he took time to visit the congregation and speak. Our next stop is on the 1600 block of Hamlin. So we make a left and head west. But not too far, as this is Hamlin. An oddity, there is no 17th Street. It goes from 18th back down to 16th. And we are just about at the location of our next building on the list. This was once Congregation Anshe Mosier. It was alternatively called Agudas Achim Anshe Mosier. Mosier was also a shtetl or village in the Belarus section of Russia. As did most of the European transplants, the emigres from this village set up an aid society for their landsmen. I believe that the spiritual leader of this congregation was Rabbi Saul Sachs. William Paley, the creator of CBS, or the Columbia Broadcasting System, was born in Chicago in 1901. His father, Sam, was listed in 1900 as an officer of the Mosier Aid Society. In 1920, the women of the congregation funded the writing of a new Torah scroll. As of now, I do not have any information on what happened to the congregation after the neighborhood changed. So we are on to our third synagogue. It is located a couple blocks east on the 1600 block of Lawndale. So we'll turn to the right, go back north to 16th. Turn right again, and go a couple side streets up to Lawndale. And a little time-lapse photography to move this along. On Lawndale, we'll make our third right and head south towards about a third of the way in on the block. This was Congregation Anshe Odessa. It means the people of Odessa, which also means that this congregation was started by people who came over from the Odessa, Ukraine. On the right side, where it looks like the tree branches are touching it, you can see the remnants of where the Ten Commandments tablets were once engraved in stone. And just above the two crosses that are at the base of the wall, Jewish stars are still etched in stone. This building was erected around 1926. Before it moved to this building, it was located at 1419 Hastings, and the spiritual leader recorded in 1919 was Rabbi L. Kaplan. The congregation gave up this location in 1952. The fourth synagogue on our list is Bikur Cholim Anshe Russia, Poland. To get to it, we have to go a couple blocks east to Millard and then another block north to 15th Street. So here we go, turning back to the left to go north back to 16th Street, where we will hang a right and go east a block to Millard. And at Millard, we've made a left to go north back towards the corner at 15th Street. And we cheated a bit to move this along. So here we are. This was the site of Bikur Cholim Anshe Russia, Poland. The synagogue was at this site from the late 1920s to about 1953. The words Bikur Cholim means visiting the sick. It is not uncommon for organizations to use those words in their name as a way for them to express the benevolent nature of their operation. More than one synagogue used Bikur Cholim in their name. I don't believe this one had any connection with the Bikur Cholim that was on the south side. Our fifth stop keeps us on 15th Street, so we're just going to head east a couple blocks to Drake. Again, we use a little magic to move this along. You'll notice what appears to be synagogues on two corners, across from each other. We are interested at first on the one that's on the left side, or the orangish-colored brick building. And as we turn around facing west, it is now on the right side, or the north side of the street. So we are looking at Congregation Beth Jacob Anshe Kreuz. When the synagogue was built in 1927, the street was then called Clifton Park Avenue. In the 1930s, it was changed to Drake Avenue. Previously, it had been housed on two locations in the Maxwell Street area. At one point, it merged with Congregation Ahavas Achim and became renamed Beth Shalom Ahavas Achim. Its current site is now in the Budlong area on North Jersey Avenue. In 2011, there was a major fire that gutted the insides, but in 2012, enough funds were collected to rebuild and maintaining the original four walls. Let's go across the street and see the sixth synagogue on our list. The building that we see a front view of on 15th Street has gone by a couple of names. In the anglicized version, it is called Anshe Leibovitz. In the Yiddishized tongue, it is known as Anshe Lubavitch. In fact, when it recongregated on the north side in Rogers Park, it became permanently known as Anshe Lubavitch. The most famous story one can tell about this congregation happened in 1923 when their longtime 20-year rabbi passed away. According to the Chicago Tribune, there may have been up to 10,000 people at his funerals. I use the plural because there were 3 of them. The first was at this synagogue, the second one was at Congregation Kehilas Jacob at Douglas and Hamlin, and the third was at Congregation Anshe Ma'ariv at 13th and Independence Boulevard. He was carried on the shoulders of several members from his house and to each synagogue. In those days, hearses were not permitted on Sunday, but the Chicago Tribune helped in intervening with officials and was able to procure a hearse from the last synagogue to Waldheim Cemetery. You can see Rabbi Zevin's large tombstone today at Waldheim. There is also a story that in 1940, that the Lubavitcher Rebbe was saved from Hitler's invasion using a ruse of a promise of employment in the United States. The Chabad organization was able to provide a document showing that the Rebbe was offered a contract by Congregation Anshe Leibovitz in Chicago to be the spiritual leader for the next 5 years at $4,000 a year. Although the deal did not come to fruition, the Rebbe was still able to get out of Riga, Latvia, to a safer European country at that time. We move on now to our 7th former synagogue. And it's not far to get there, literally. It is a halfway down the block from this synagogue. So we hang a right, and we're going to go south on Drake Avenue. So here we are at what was once Beth Abram Anshe Poem Synagogue. Also associated with this location was Warsaw Congregation B'nai Abraham Anshe Poland. Anshe Poland means that these are people who came from Poland. So it makes sense to add Warsaw, as Warsaw is a city in Poland. And now on to the final synagogue in this group. Imagine that we leapfrog 2 side streets east and 1 south, and are now on the 1600 block of South Trumbull. This private home was Congregation Lev Sameach on the west side. It was a shtibel, or a synagogue operated out of somebody's house. This was typical when a synagogue was run by a Hasidic family. And in this case, the dynasty was Rabbi Twersky's. In this view, it is the building to the right of the fire hydrant. Along with all the other synagogues in the area, it moved to the north side in the mid-1950s. Its new location was just a couple blocks east of Northeastern Illinois University, just off of Bryn Mawr Avenue. I believe the synagogue is no longer functioning. Thank you for your patience in going through this hop, skip, and a jump through a few short blocks between the 1500 and 1800 block in the Lawndale area. Look for further episodes of Chicago's Forgotten Synagogues.